Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. This week, I'm really excited to welcome Carolyn Tucker. She is a healthy aging wellness coach and personal trainer. One of the conversations I've been having a lot lately with women is about the importance of intergenerational conversations between women and recognizing and supporting each other and sharing knowledge, the knowledge that comes from our own experiences so that we have some idea and roadmap about what has been and what's to come. So, Carolyn, I'm so glad that you are here and that you are with us today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to your podcast.
Yeah. So you and I had a conversation before we started recording, and you have a really fascinating story. So tell me your story. How did you get to where you are today?
Okay, well, it goes back a few years. Um, so back in my very early 20s, actually at the age of 20, I moved from Montreal, where I grew up, to Vancouver, and went out there really as an exploratory, get out of the city, get out of Montreal, and see something new. I was immediately struck when I got to Vancouver by the incredible sense of like wellness that was already there. And this is going back to the 80s. And so it was very shortly thereafter I arrived that I started to get really like excited about the idea of getting fit. I was not a fit teenager. I'd say I was probably a lazy teenager, but was very quickly drawn into the whole vibe that Vancouver offered. I mean, it's hard not to be athletic in Vancouver because it just really lends itself to that. Anyway, so I started exploring different avenues and got involved with aerobics, which was sort of coming on the scene around that time. And then I went into the gym and I started doing weight training. And a few years after, I stayed in Vancouver for about 4 years. I completed my university degree in business and did a minor in kinesiology at the time, which was not at all on my radar when I moved out there. I fell so in love with that fitness. And I arrived to Toronto. I didn't go back to Montreal. I arrived to Toronto with the intentions of promoting the concept of fitness. Like I got really excited about healthy living and wanted to share it with the world. And so when I arrived in Toronto, that was my objective, which wasn't an easy task in 1984 because that wasn't really a happening thing. Fitness was like very small potatoes. People were not really working out at that time, certainly not the way they do anywhere near what they do today. So
Mm-hmm.
it was a struggle to find a way to promote on the scale that I was excited to do. But I ended up working in at a YMCA. There was a big brand new YMCA opening in Toronto. I worked there. I became the sales manager. Discovered that I was actually good in sales. Worked there for a couple of years, and then veered off for a while into the corporate world. But never lost my personal passion for fitness while I was working at the Y. I taught aerobics and I was working out at the gym and all this kind of stuff. But I did leave the industry in terms of employment for a period of time, for a number of years, and got really wrapped up in the corporate scene until I reached a point where I couldn't be in the corporate world anymore. Actually, what happened was somebody suggested I try a yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
I had young kids at the time. I was working full time. There was no way I could fit yoga into my life. And then my two kids at the same time went off to camp. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go try a yoga class. And pretty much from the very first class that I took, I was struck with some like profound I don't know, wow experience because it was the first time I really slowed down and my body had this chance to like integrate this mind, but you know, what they talk about mind body, I didn't know anything about that. I was very physically active, but I had never really correlated that with the mind. And then I did this yoga practice and I was like, oh my God. So I
Mm-hmm.
started to get really into yoga. This was an Ashtanga yoga practice. It was very intense and strong practice, which is what I love because I was sort of a hardcore workout person. And and then eventually I found myself like cheating on my work. Like I'd slip out of the office in the middle of the day and go take a yoga class. and then come back to work and pretend that I had been out seeing a client for lunch, and eventually realized that I was so crazy about yoga and so much hating what I was doing in the corporate world that I eventually said, I'm done, I'm out of here. And I quit my job that I'd been in for a long time, making six figures for a very long time, and decided, I don't even think I knew what I was going to do. I just couldn't do it anymore. That's sort of what happens, I think, when you finally
Mhm.
bring the connection of mind and body together.
Yeah,
You,
that's the question I was just going to ask you, because you talked about your kids going off to camp, and then you talked about being able to stop, right? Yoga allowed you to stop and slow down. If you hadn't gone to that yoga class and started that practice that allowed you to tune into the mind, do you think you would have had the same realizations about the impact your work was having on you?
I really don't think I would have. And that's an excellent question. I don't think I would have, because I believe, and as I work with clients now all the time, this is what I see. People get very
Mhm.
wrapped up in their world and they cannot see the forest for the trees. And it's not to say that my clients are not intelligent, and they're not,
Mhm.
you know, like totally together people, but
Mhm.
we're being pushed. It's like a push, we're being pushed like a herd in a
Mhm.
certain direction. We never really have the time or take the time to stop and say, is this what I want? Is this what I
Mhm.
love? Is this really what I want to be doing? So I think, to answer your question, I would say no. I think the yoga practice was an absolute game changer for me. It absolutely, I mean, I had never slowed down. I'm
Mhm.
a high energy person on a given day, even after years and years of practicing yoga. So you could only imagine where I was at that time, being a full time and worker with two young kids and whatever. And all of a sudden, I got into a class where all I was like focusing on my body and I was focusing on my breath, and I started having this relationship with my body in a whole different way that I
Yeah.
had never experienced before, like integrating like my mind into my movement, and I was blown away. So
Mhm.
it was a quick transition.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important place to put some emphasis, because I've described it on this show a couple of times as the patriarchal busy box, right? When every structure, when you're talking about those structures that push us into constantly being in motion and constantly being in action, so that you can't stop and actually listen to and drop down into your body. With some of the people I've been doing work with lately, I've started describing myself as a stopping coach, which, which
That's a
sounds like,
good title. Great title.
yeah, I teach you how to stop
Yeah,
and actually tune in and listen to what is going on inside your body.
yeah.
And to be able to truly listen, you have to be connected to your body.
I think you have to be connected to your body, but I also think you have to um, make an effort to take the time to pay
Mhm.
attention to what's happening. So for me, in that scenario, I knew I hated my job by the time I went to that first yoga class.
Mhm.
I had been doing my job for um, about 14 years or something like that. And I was at the stage when I started taking those yoga classes. I mean, that's what I think, makes life so interesting. Started taking those yoga classes right around the time where it was like, I so badly wanted out of what I was doing, but like, the whole focus of your podcast is about transforming where you're at.
Mhm.
So I was exactly that. I was a couple of years younger than 45. I was the early 40s.
Yeah.
And so I knew I was unhappy, but it was like, now, but what do you do about it? I make a lot of money, and that's all I know. I've been doing it for a really long time. I'm not a doctor, or I don't have a profession. Like it was my profession, but it was a sales career. But the yoga and the moment, so I mean, is it the yoga or is it the mind body connection? I don't know, call it what you
Mhm.
will, but it was so compelling and so profound for me that I could not continue. It was worth it for me to make zero funds and get out of what I
Mhm.
was doing. And so, your whole focus is on bucking the system. And so I bucked the system. And I remember walking around my office and saying goodbye to people after working with them for however many years, and every one of them saying to me, "You're so lucky you're getting out." But you know
Mhm.
what? I'm not lucky. I took a risk. I took the
Mhm.
chance. Every one of them could have left, but people feel very stuck where they are.
Mhm.
It's pretty scary. I was terrified. I was
Mhm.
terrified, especially financially. We had two little kids. They were both in private school. We were suddenly going to be relying entirely on my husband's income. It was going to utterly change the way we lived our lives. But it was such a visceral stage in my life. It was actually very similar to my need to move to Vancouver. So that was the time when I left my career, I would say was the second time that I had, like, it was so compelling. I moved out to Vancouver. I should mention I didn't have know a soul. I went out there completely on my own at the age of 19 because I needed to get out of, something was wrong with what I had, where I was at home, and I wanted something more. I knew there was something more to my life, but I had no idea because I had never explored.
Mhm.
So my years in Vancouver was my exploration into, like, the unknown, I suppose. And then I took the next big leap of faith when I left the career. So I ended up, because my girlfriend, who was the one who introduced me to yoga and said, "You must go take this yoga class," she's the one that said to me, "You should become a yoga teacher." Well, you should know that at the time, having been a weightlifter and an aerobics instructor, I mean, downward dog was the most painful pose in the world to me, and I
Mhm.
was not very flexible whatsoever. And I thought she was crazy. Like, how in heaven's name could I ever be a yoga teacher? But I did pursue that, and I did my teacher training, and eventually became a yoga teacher. And so that was a whole new trajectory in my life that I went through. I was lucky. I lived in a reasonable size home with a good sized basement, and I was able to transform my basement into a yoga studio so that because I had young kids at home, and I didn't really have a way of, like, I had to be home when they got home from school. So I turned my basement into a studio, and I was sort of the new kid on the block, and I lived in an area where yoga was becoming kind of popular, and I opened up this space, and I taught yoga in my home for about 12 years. And then I had my next transition, and
Mhm.
I was like, I don't like teaching yoga anymore. I am
Mhm.
not enjoying being a yoga teacher anymore. I'm finding this was by now, uh, I was probably in my early 50s. I was like, this is starting to really hurt my body. It's too much of the same routine.
Mhm.
And, and so still love the spiritual connection, the mind body connection. That was not at any part of it that I didn't love. The physical component of yoga was starting to really wear me down. And so I then made my next big move, which was my next big transition in my life, which was we decided to sell our house, and we moved from the north of the city where we lived to downtown. I moved into a small little home where I was going to have no access. I couldn't possibly teach classes if I wanted to, but more
Mhm.
importantly, I wasn't interested. I was at this point entering well into my 50s, and discovering that my yoga practice had probably was starting to do more harm than good from a physical point of view, because I was sort of like overdoing the stretching and whatever. And I started to really explore healthy aging movement practices, because I was that person. Like,
Mhm.
everything I have been doing over the last, I'm going to say, 10 years has been research, which is for me first, like really trying to figure out for
Mhm.
my body and then sharing it with other people. So I created a type of a class. I mean, I still call it a practice, because yoga is sort of referred to as a practice. I created a
Mhm.
practice that sort of had the mind body connection of a yoga practice, but it was much more integrated with mobility work and strength and stability, so that it could balance, so that I could support a body that was well into the midlife, and as you enter into that stage of life, your needs and your physical needs in your body really begin to change. But the back to the herd mentality, there's not a lot of like, nobody's really saying, hey, now it is. It's become much more mainstream, but 10 years ago, it was not. Hey, you're in your 50s now. Some of those hardcore workouts are not gonna be the right thing for you. Yoga's great, but you got to do weight training. You need to have resistance training because your muscles are starting um, to get to atrophy. You've got to find ways to maintain your muscle mass. So that became my next exploration, and I spent about 6 years creating. I called the class Yogility, which was yoga combined with mobility, stability, and agility. And I
Mm-hmm.
did that for I did it in studios before the pandemic, and then I did it online throughout the pandemic, and then and it was great. Like I was all into it. I had a really nice following of clients. People seemed to like, if people understood the concept of what I was, because some people are very devoted to yoga and they just want to
Mm-hmm.
do the sun salutations, the poses, and that's their choice. But for those of us who felt they understood that their joints were starting to become a little more stiff and whatever, they were following me in that route. And so I did that for a while, and then about 3 years ago, um, I started realizing that even though I was doing more integrated movements, my body was sore all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
the area that became really clear to me that was missing was the heavy loaded weight training.
Mm-hmm.
So I transitioned once again to this thing that I had created for myself. I was running a business. I had clients on a regular basis. I was teaching all my classes. And I said, I got to get out of this. I have to focus now on weight training because it is essential for healthy aging. Subsequent
Mm-hmm.
to this whole new transition, I also did a health coaching program and became a certified health coach. And but I wasn't that interested in health coaching specifically for someone who needed to lose 10 pounds. That didn't really excite me.
Mm-hmm.
What I
Yeah.
really wanted to focus on was healthy aging, because back to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I was that client who needed to understand, why am I tired all the time? How stress
Mm-hmm.
is impacting my life? The importance of sleep and all this kind of stuff. And so my entire focus got reorganized towards making healthy aging the primary focus of my business. And now I work here I am today. Basically, I have clients who I just personal train, but all my personal
Mm-hmm.
training is very much designed to support an aging body.
Mm-hmm.
Clients with whom I do a combination of coaching and training. So I don't have any just coaching clients. All my coaching clients are also training. So I do a
Right.
combination of both. And
Yeah.
basically, the what became clear to me over the last few years, because I've done so much research to understand what's required for longevity and well-being, because it's actually a totally different game. It
Mm-hmm.
is like, it's like you transition out of your 40s and move into your 50s, and the stakes change. The stakes really
Yeah.
change, and if anybody would tell you otherwise, they're fooling themselves. One of the things I've really tried to say very often is, if you're still working out the way you did in your 30s, or eating the way you did in your 30s or even in your 40s, you are doing yourself a disservice, because you're not supporting your longevity genes, because protein, weight training, and stress management
Mm-hmm.
I would say the three, well, stress management, but supported through sleep, because I do believe that sleep is the
Yes. Yep.
everything is affected by from there.
So I can't wait to dive into those things with you, because in my own practice, I know how essential they are. And it's also a super complex conversation, right? On many levels, in the aging world, in the what it means in the body positivity realm. There's so many elements of that that I want to talk to you about. And I also want to take a minute and acknowledge your story is so important because it shows that, well, when you were not afraid to evolve,
Correct.
right? Yeah. And so many of us get stuck in that story of you choose one thing and that's the thing that you do for the rest of your life. And, I was at a university tour with my oldest the other day, well, a couple of weeks ago now. And it was interesting because they were saying in that session that kids who are young adults who are graduating from university now will have 5 to 7 different careers, not just jobs, but careers. And you were ahead of your time in all of that. And what I'm wondering, the question that is coming to me is, do you think part of that is because you were so deeply connected to your body? And what was it that allowed you to listen to that inner voice that told you, no, it's time to do something different now? Because I think so many of us hear that message and just push it down. Like when you were talking about the way your colleagues responded to you leaving, I am having the same reality. I'm living that reality right now because I am just about to hit the button where I am taking a very early retirement. And people keep saying to me, "You're so brave." And I struggle with accepting that because I'm not sure that it was a brave choice. It was the only choice. Like I was either going to continue doing what I was doing and not survive it, or choose myself. So that's my question. How did you know to choose yourself over and over again?
I think there's that doing a lot of faith. My really to take. I would say that my not think for people to Vancouver with scary things like me. Said it wasn't like it wasn't something brave. It was out of necessity. I had to move on. As I've gotten older and wiser and can look back on my life with more clarity, what I would say is bravo to the young generation who's going to have 7 careers. Like I have been supporting that for my children from day one. I have one kid who's been on a pretty straight path, but the other kid has made quite a few different changes in his life, and I'm like all for it because
Mhm.
you get one chance at life, and it's just you. And I think if you stay on the side of fear and indecision and complacency, you are really doing a disservice to yourself long term. Because yes, there's going to be the unknown, and yes, it's going to be scary, but you don't know what waits on the other
Mhm.
side, right? And so,
Yeah.
like, I rather be scared and trip up and make mistakes and have to divert, and I have, God knows, so many times. But I rather have that and learn than
Mhm.
stay somewhere in a state of misery. Like I mean, I'm a person who wears my heart on my sleeve. So if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, it's super clear.
Mhm.
Um, so I'd say that it's combination of partially a personality thing and then really a real like a real sense of there's an adventure side to me, which is to say, let's just do it. Like so I travel the world. Like I go places,
Mhm.
like I try to go on big bad holidays all over the stuff, bad big good holidays, because I want to see the world. So that's, I guess that's just partially who I am as a person, and then also just believe that there's so much that we need to explore in
Mhm.
life, and what a shame to stop in your tracks and not find out what's happening on the other side. Like what happens when you cross that bridge?
Yeah.
What's waiting for you on the other side? So it's been, and what I could say is like where I'm at today feels the most in alignment for me than I've ever felt in my whole life. I almost, in some ways, feel like every stage of my life prior to this has led me to where I am
Mhm.
at this moment. Like I do feel that my life experience, I've struggled a lot through, with like emotional stuff, and I've had deep quality. I've been on a zillion retreats to sort of process a lot of childhood traumas and things, and that is all coming to light to, as a wellness coach, because wellness
Mhm.
is not about eating kale and and just lifting weights. It has so many other aspects associated with it, and to be a
Mhm.
whole person, we're complex. We have many sides to us. So um, I'm so grateful that from the of, like you said, it was because I actually had to.
Mhm. Yeah, it's and I think you articulated something important in that we think we know how to write the end of the story, right? If we make a change or we take a leap, we think that we know what's going to happen or not happen. And that's what keeps us trapped in the space we're in, because our brains naturally, because of that fear response, want to write a story that says that the unknown is more unsafe and it's scary and things aren't going to go
Right.
well, so you need to stay where you are. So being able to hear that fear voice, recognize it, acknowledge it, and say, but the truth is, fear voice, you do not know what is coming. And that is, I think, one of the most important ways for people to move out of that fear cycle is knowing that you can't write the end of the story, and there is no end until, like the final the
Yeah.
final end, when there is an end there. Yeah, exactly. And there's just opportunity to continue to live. And that is where the work that you are doing around wellness, and aging, I think, is so essential, and essential for women at all different phases of their life to know how our bodies work at one phase and how they are going to shift and evolve over time. So the complexities in that conversation are myriad, however, right? So I will be very transparent and say I have a really strong fitness practice. I work out, cardio, lifting weights, yoga, like all of the things every day. And I have a group of women that I coach as well. And the conversations where we started were about motivation. So one of the women who was in that group someone had asked her a question of, how can you love your body if you are actively working to change it? And that was a really powerful moment for conversation in our group. And I think it's where some of the tricky intersection between body positivity and body love and the work of caring for ourselves seem to be having some miscommunication, right? So caring for our bodies, it's not actively trying to change my body. It is actively caring for my body enough and pouring time and energy into it so that it can function in a way that will carry me through the rest of my life in a way that I want to live.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. So, and that's what I think is why I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now
Mm-hmm.
more than I've ever enjoyed it in my life, because there, with age comes wisdom. When you are in your mid 50s and beyond, um, your motivation and inspiration for exercise, healthy living and eating and so on takes on, I for most of us, takes on a different priority. Um, so sure, I prefer to be on the thinner side and look at that. Definitely, I'd be totally lying if I said that doesn't have personally a motivation. But I can tell you that that's not my why. My
Mm-hmm.
why is because I love hiking. I love biking. I love playing with my dog in the park. I love traveling. I love playing pickleball. I have a million different things that I love to do, and I don't want to have anything go wrong with my body that would prevent me from being able to do the things that I love to do, those physical things. But
Mm-hmm.
beyond that, um, back to what you just said, and I completely agree with you, and I feel the exact same way. Um, why are we exercising if we're trying to? How do we love our bodies if we're trying to change it? I don't see loving my body as a physical manifestation. I see loving my body as a respect for my body. It's in the same way that that I love my children and I want the
Mm-hmm.
best for them, and I'm going to provide them with nourishing food so that they can thrive. And that's how that's what it is for me. So it's a love. I think it's a love for life. I
Yeah.
honestly think that my mother is an example. She's 93 years old and she's still like she just loves life. So maybe on some level, I have inherited that passion for living and life and just like showing up for my life. And my healthy body is
Mm-hmm.
a huge component of it. So it's a love for my body from a point of view of compassion and care and concern for its well-being. That's how I see it. And I won't discount the fact that sure, if I put on a tank top and I look toned and fit, that's a awesome bonus. But
Mm-hmm.
if I had to choose between toned arms or getting up in the morning, being able to bounce out of bed because I have energy. If they said like that's what your exercise, I'll take the energy to bounce out of bed because I just want to keep enjoying my life. I want to be able
Mm-hmm.
to do the things that I. It's really about doing the things that I love to do because I think that I have a client who a little while back, she told me that she really enjoyed doing this activity, but she wasn't going to do it this year. She had loved in the past pre-COVID. She had loved doing this activity, and she decided that she wasn't going to. It came up this year that she could go back to doing it. And she decided she wasn't going to do it. She didn't feel strong and fit enough. She lost her strength like over the course of COVID. Like she got out of shape. And I said to her, no effing way. No
Mm-hmm.
way. We are not going to allow that to be your attitude. We are going to start to work out and I'm going to get you strong and you're going to get right back out. And the day that she was in my house, I had her contact the leader of the program and say, she thought she had lost her there was space and she got in and she started next week. And that's what happens for a lot of people. They're like, well, you know what? Like I don't, my knees hurt now, so I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, 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 no. It's in our control. We are our own best wellness coach, and it is work. It's not easy. As you get
Mm-hmm.
older, it's not, but that commitment to health and well-being, in my personal opinion, that's love for your body.
Mm-hmm.
That's love
Yeah.
for yourself.
Yes. And that is the place that I operate from when I am supporting women in that as well. And I have, a similar to your mother, so I have longevity in my family in that my great grandmother and my grandmother both lived into their 90s. My grandma is 91. And I love her, and she is spicy in all kinds of ways, but movement is not one of them. And so I watched her. She did not ever have a wellness practice. And I see the results of that now. At 91, she has a walker. She has all kinds of pain. Moving is really challenging. Like when she came over for Christmas dinner, we went and picked her up, brought her to our house. But she needed to leave about 2 hours later because she was like, "Oh, all of this is just so much work. I'm just so tired." And quite honestly, that is my motivation,
Yeah.
because if I'm going to live well into my 90s, I want to live. I
Yeah.
want to move. I
Yeah.
want to be able
Yeah.
to continue to have
Yeah.
all of the mobility that I have.
Me too.
And when you were talking about pain in your client, I think pain becomes a block in so many ways, and we don't realize that it's actually movement that will overcome that pain
Right.
in many cases. In some cases, not. Like there are instances where it just is. But yeah,
Actually, I would
building.
disagree with that. I don't think movement
Okay,
is
good.
I would say that movement is always lotion. That is
Yes.
that's the
Yep.
exception. So actually, I think, I mean, unless you're too far gone and your body isn't allowed, can no longer do that. But if
Yeah.
you're in any way still physically mobile, then I think movement is always going to be a really appropriate and useful component to healthy aging lifestyle. In
Mhm.
fact, I would say that movement is probably, I mean, it's all important, but I think movement is
Yeah.
probably the most important because of so many circulatory system and the nervous system and the
Mhm.
lymphatic system. I mean, there's so many systems that are
Mhm.
affected by how we move. Even our fascia is impacted by just simple things like standing, like someone who's sitting at a desk all day, if they just get up and move their neck and stuff, they're getting some movement in their fascia, which keeps the joints less stiff and stuff like that. So I think that
Mhm.
almost I can't think of a scenario where movement would not be an appropriate sort of component of a healthy
Mhm.
lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. I love to hear that because I agree. So I am, as we know, well, I'm almost 46. Actually, in a couple of weeks, I will be 46. But I'm heading into not. I'm in perimenopause. So, what are some of the
Going.
changes? Oh, always exciting. I actually the other day, I think I had my first hot flash. So that was exciting. So every day is a new adventure into like, well, what's going to happen today? I don't know. We'll see. But what are some of the changes I can expect? So, like I said, currently I do cardio, I lift weights. What are some of the changes I can expect to see over, as I move through menopause and or through perimenopause into menopause? And what are some of the changes that should be on my radar?
I'm going to say that the most important thing you need to manage is stress
Okay.
because as women in general designed to handle stress at a high level. And stress
Mhm.
means over exercising, high levels of intermittent fasting, you know, child rearing, taking care of elderly parents, overworking. These things, I believe, if you can manage your stress levels, like
Mhm.
pay attention to stress levels in your 40s and become really aware of how your stress, because as you enter perimenopause and then into menopause, your sleep becomes
Mhm.
severely impacted for a lot of people, right? With hot flashes and mood swings and like whatever. And so like stress and sleep, whereas they sort of like they sit together holding hands, and
Mhm.
one stress will mess up your sleep will increase your stress. So though I do believe that sleep is the top priority for healthy living and aging. I think the stress component has to be first. We have more control to some degree. I don't even know if that's true, because I think we have a lot of control over sleep too, if we know all the parameters that affect our sleep. But I do believe that the stress management is something that we have to really consider, especially for women in perimenopause, because you are starting to drop estrogen and progesterone, like they are starting to go down to a degree. And what that implies is your cortisol levels begin to rise. Cortisol is sort of like the bully in the schoolyard, and will dominate your hormonal levels. The, I guess the issue with that is, when you've got too much cortisol happening in your body, you start to experience metabolic dysregulation that brings in things like high blood sugars and high blood pressure, and cholesterol starts to rise and that kind of stuff. So I think, though there are so many answers to that question, I wish I knew, I guess speaking for me, I wish I knew how stupid I was. So I should say that again. Let me rephrase that. I wish I knew how stupid I was behaving, and how much my stress was impacting my life, because I didn't know. I didn't know that a woman who's going into perimenopause and subsequently into menopause is not literally physiologically designed to manage multiple, like, high levels of stress. We are just not designed for that. If evolutionarily, we were staying back at the camp taking care of the babies, and the men were out, hunting and foraging. And so we're physiologically, we don't have the equipment that the men have to handle those high levels of stress. And so you see it all the time. You see women in their 40s and in their early 50s, they are burnt out, because we are primarily, or more often than not, like it or not, we are the ones that are, taking care of the children more, taking care of the older parents more. We're trying to work. We're trying to, manage, and we're capable. That's the other problem. We're damn capable. So we take on a lot, and then we burn ourselves out. And then when the sleep starts to become impacted, well, that brings in, ghrelin, which is a hormone that makes you feel hungry if you haven't slept well. And then you start to gain the belly fat. And women who are in their 40s, who have gotten away with it for years and years, eating whatever they want and never having an inch of fat on their body, suddenly they have this belly fat that starts to arise. And it's not because so they start to eat less, and they start to starve themselves a little bit, work out harder. Hello, more stress. That's like starving yourself is a stress, over exercising is a stress. So I think that is, if I had to say one thing that is worth paying close attention to, it's your stress levels, and honoring downtime, honoring downtime, giving yourself the time off to rest your body. Like, even if you think you don't need it, you probably need it. So
that's probably when you need it the most, when you think you don't.
Like, that's why I'm very committed to my Oura ring that I wear every day, that tells me where I'm at from a recovery point of view. And if it says, you need to chill today, I chill. I never ever paid attention to that stuff in my 40s and my 50s. I never paid attention to that stuff, but now I honor it, because I have seen the impact. I have not been a good sleeper for the majority of my adult life, and it's had its impact on me, So that, I think, if I had to say something, the big thing that you got to sort of be on the watch for is how stress is being manifested in your life. You got hormones. That's what's happening. Perimenopause and menopause are shifts in hormones, and our bodies don't, you're used to having the estrogen and the progesterone to help you feel balanced, feel good, be in a good mood, more stable, manage your stress, and then suddenly it starts to tank, and then you don't have that anymore. So I think the stress is the biggest factor.
Thank you. There are so many things you said in that I we could dive into. But I think that the dichotomy between what we are built to do and our capability is where there is, like, again, that misconnect, where is that misconnection happens, because the story now that we are told is that you are only a successful woman when you do everything right, when you have a perfect home and you're doing all the right mothering things and you're working out and you're cooking food and you're doing all the things for the holiday and you have a great career, and there it is impossible.
Impossible.
It is impossible,
Yeah.
and yet we continue to try to chase try to chase the tail of the impossible because of our capability. And I think that is something that is important to recognize, because I know, like, I can hear the voices of some people in my head getting upset about this conversation. And we are not talking about capability at all. Yeah, sure. Maybe you're capable of doing all of those things, but how do you feel in the capability of that?
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
is the question that so many women don't let themselves sit with. Is like, but how do I feel and what do I really want?
Yeah.
And if
I
we're
think, yeah.
honest with ourselves, yeah, sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking you're making a really good point. Yeah. That's, I think that's to the detriment of the female race, because
Mhm.
we are damn capable,
Yeah.
and we do have the ability potentially to do be really good at our job, be really good at making a nice meal, being really good at parenting, but we're not good
Mhm.
at doing all of them at the same time.
Exactly.
And what we end up doing is crash and burn,
Yes.
because we try. So that's, I mean, and I speak from hindsight. I'm not speaking from experience. I did not do it right. I did way too much of everything, and
Mhm.
did reach crash and burn on more than one occasion, a few burnouts. And so I think that there's, back to loving your body. I
Mhm.
think that's incredible love for oneself, when one
Mhm.
says to oneself, I need to rest. I need time. That's essentially how I spend, as my coaching business is almost entirely managing people to teach them how to say no.
Yes.
Yeah, I spend so much of my time teaching my clients how to say no and honoring their needs, because
Mhm.
there's something about us women, we just don't stop to say, okay, well, what do I want? What's for
Mhm.
me? Oh, you want me to do this? Oh, you want me to go there? You want me to? It's like, and then we end up like, and we're so stressed out, and we can't figure out why. We don't
Yep.
understand why I have this. I live in a, like, I'm not talking about me. Someone might say, I live in a beautiful home. I have a really nice husband. My kids are doing great. And you're bloody miserable. Well, because you haven't put yourself on the
Mhm.
table. You've put everybody else first, right? So again, I think that's where being a little bit older makes you a little bit wiser. For many of us who are, north of 55, our children
Mhm.
are a little bit older. We don't have as many demands on, like, we're not dealing with little children anymore, so we do have a little bit more space in our lives, and many of us do turn towards focusing on ourselves more, and that's when I feel, really focusing on the right movement
Mhm.
practice, the right nutrition, the right relationship, the right recovery time. We really, that's when we really begin to thrive. And I've seen this now over and over and over again with my
Mhm.
clients, when we sit down and we go through component after component after component, and start to see where the deficiencies are, and where the nourishment is required, whether that's physical nourishment or love or massage or food, like the right foods, or what, or the, appropriate sleep, or whatever it is. And they are, even something as like hydration. People are, a lot of people are they're not eating adequately. So we've spoken in the past about protein
Mhm.
and the importance of protein. So like protein is now sort of it's all the rage. I don't know most if you are in any way paying attention to the health world,
Mhm.
especially the longevity side of the health world. Protein has become like a very big talking point, and that comes because that's really because muscle mass is such a incredibly important aspect of our health, because our muscle is such a huge part of our existence.
Mhm.
It's like it's the biggest organ in our body, and from the age of 35 onward, our muscles are on the decline. Our muscle mass is on the decline, and it becomes incumbent upon us to retain that muscle. So at 35 and 40 and 45, we may not see the deterioration because it's at a lesser degree. But once you hit 50, it's declining pretty quickly.
Mhm.
It takes quite a bit to keep it. Like, you're not going to likely build much muscle in your 50s and your 60s, but you can definitely retain it. And then once you
Mhm.
have that muscle, that's your talking about your grandma who's using a walker. She probably never prioritized muscle mass because she didn't even
No.
know that it was something she needed to think about. And it wasn't, 50 years ago when she was in her 40s. But
Yeah.
now, like, if you're not consuming an adequate amount of protein and prioritizing weight training in your exercise program, loading up your muscles with either resistance bands, or I personally prefer heavy weights,
Mhm.
you are doing a disservice to your body. Maybe not for this moment. You may not feel the impact at 45 or 50, but at 70, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel
Mhm.
it, and that's when the falls happen. And I don't know if you've heard this statistic, but that there's a stat from somebody that I heard that said over the age of 65, if you fall, what did she say? Something like 60% of people over the age of 65, if they have a fall, will never walk again. Like,
Wow.
oh my God,
That's terrifying.
that's terrifying. But
Yeah.
you don't get to 65 after 45. There's a lot of years to get to
Yeah.
that 65. So
Yes.
that's why your podcast is like sort of is directed to the 45 and 50-ish um, population, and like you're going to get there. So now
Mhm.
you've got so much time to invest, put that money in the bank. And money in the
Mhm.
bank is eating an adequate amount of protein, getting an adequate amount of resistance training, really prioritizing sleep, cutting out as much of the alcohol as you possibly can. I mean, the processed foods. There's a lot of other stuff. Like
Mhm.
those things are hugely important. But from a longevity perspective, prioritizing muscle mass, I think, is so essential because it's your energy source. If you
Yes.
don't have an adequate amount of muscle, you are not going to have the energy to do the things you love to do, and you're going to be my client who said, I can't do this activity anymore because I don't feel strong enough. Well,
Mhm.
but we're making her strong enough. She's going to play. She's going to go
Yeah.
do her thing because she's gained the strength back to do what she wants to do. So I'm
Mhm.
very that is my passion. If I had to pinpoint a passion, it's like no, 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 no. I don't care how I'm working with a woman who's 75. She hasn't really prioritized fitness. She's like done a little bit here and there throughout her life,
Mhm.
and I'm making her into a little kick-ass because
That's awesome.
she's working still full time. She has her own business. She wants to keep doing her thing. She wants to travel. She wants to do her thing, and we can all do it. We have to be willing to.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why I was so excited about this conversation today. And that's why I talked about intergenerational conversations at the beginning, because if we are empowered with this information at this stage in our lives, imagine how much further ahead we will
Correct.
be,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Yes. Like you
I,
said, making the deposits now.
here's a simple example. I have a 30-year-old son.
Hmm.
He called me yesterday. He said, I'm feeling crappy. I'm feeling anxious. I'm not motivated. He's a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not feeling inspired. I don't have my creativity. And I said, tell me about the week you've just been through. He said, yeah, I was feeling really good. So I went out every night. I drank every night. And
Mm.
yeah, he said, my dear, drinking impacts your REM sleep. There's a direct, like a direct dotted line. Alcohol, REM sleep.
Mm-hmm.
REM sleep is your mood, it's your creativity, it's your short-term memory, and it's your power. You have very likely, even though you might have thought you were sleeping all throughout the week, you very likely received no REM sleep over the
Mm-hmm.
course of the last week. And that's why you're feeling anxious, and that's why you're feeling exhausted and depressed and blah, blah, blah. So, Sunday night, Monday night, he prioritized his sleep. He didn't drink. He messaged me today. He said, feel amazing. Like, I've
Mm-hmm.
slept really well. I feel rested and I'm back. And he's 30 years old. He's at the peak of his life. But
Yeah.
that's how impactful that sleep component is. And you don't get it back. You don't get it back.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very important point. You don't get it back, and it is possible to change it
Correct.
for going forward.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so sleep, protein, muscle mass, hydration,
Stress
keep moving.
management. Stress
Stress
management.
management. Yes,
Don't,
stress
don't,
management.
don't. That's just the reason I'm so hyped on the stress management component is because it impacts everything. So start with
Yeah.
stress. If you're experiencing a high level of stress, you are likely going to be impacted by sleep. If you're impacted by sleep, you are likely going to feel more tired, less energy, and hungrier. You're going to
Mhm.
likely eat more, work out less, and be in a shitty mood, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So, um, so they all though I think that sleep is at the top of the priority list as far as like if you had to choose like what to put your priorities on, make sleep your number one priority, but you're not going to be successful at it unless you're managing your stress. So
Mhm.
it's a bit of a like they all
The
sort of go
cycle.
hand in hand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I recently had 2 days that describe this really well. So, a couple of weeks ago when we had that beautiful weather, I had slept really well. I got up, I did my meditation, I did my workout, I gave time to myself. I needed to take my grandma to the fracture clinic. I had time to do that. I came home, worked with some clients, went and was able to have some coffee with a friend in the sunshine, came home, a little bit more time on clients, and then had a lovely dinner with my family. And I felt amazing. And I thought, this is what I have been missing my whole life. This gentle, beautiful time for me, time for other people. It's a really lovely balance, and I'm actually living. And then, so Sunday, I mentioned earlier, I had done a trade show on Sunday, which was 6 hours of standing on my feet, pouring energy into other people. And then yesterday, and then I didn't sleep very well, and I got up and I still had, a laundry list of things to do. And I found myself at the grocery store just forcing myself to put one foot in front of the other. And I remembered that that is how I always used to feel every day of my life before I made a decision to put myself first. That is how I felt. Like I was forcing myself through life. And the discrepancy in those 2 days was so affirming that, to your point of what, yes, I might be capable, but I am going to choose what feels good and is in service of myself and my wellness at this point in time.
Yeah, bravo to you. Yeah, I mean, listen, we all have demands on our lives, and
Mhm.
it would be nice if we could have all our days be filled with sunshine and time to go for coffee with our friends and go for a nice walk and whatever. Those days, that's awesome. ways in our day to
Mhm.
find a few moments to, like you said, meditate and meet up with a friend. Have like you basically what you did was you took time for yourself.
Mhm.
You had a social interaction with a friend, which is always like raises your endorphins and makes you feel like it's good. And you're making connections and you work with your clients. You're putting some good energy out into the
Mhm.
world who you want every
Yeah.
day. Like all my meals out for lunch and dinner for the last 2 weeks. Not my favorite thing to do. Probably didn't hit my priority, my protein um, limits on every single meal because I just couldn't do it. And so you go,
Mhm.
okay, well, these 2 weeks are probably not my best 2 weeks in life, but we aspire to. We work the best
Yeah.
that we can. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are wise words to wrap up this conversation on. So, thank you so much for your time. I am so excited for listeners to hear this because there is so much really powerful and valuable information in this. So, thank you so much. And I'm so glad you are in the world doing the work that you are doing.
Lisa, it was a pleasure talking to you. Really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you.